Welcome back. The Arab Charter on Human Rights was adopted in 1994. It covers various human rights, including the right to freedom, equality of persons before the law, and protection from torture. Well, earlier this month, the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies released a report claiming that the status of human rights in the Arab region has actually gotten worse over the past year. The report says Islamists are less likely to be targeted, but there is an increase in the repression of reformists, human rights defenders, and activists. It says that Arab governments have made concerted efforts to suppress independent media. The Institute also claims leaders of protest movements and other forms of political action are increasingly being silenced. In the report, it's claimed Arab League support for authoritarian regimes is at an all-time high. Among other criticisms, the Cairo Institute argues the League's support for the military coup in Mauritania undermined the Mauritanian people's right to democracy. So with such a damning report, what hope does this conference have of improving human rights across all the Arab nations? Well, still with us are our guests in Doha, Fateh Azam, also in Doha, Hassan Ibrahim, and in Washington, D.C., Joe Stork. Thanks for continuing to stay with us, gentlemen. Mr. Stork, if I could come to you now, this criticism that the Arab League supports authoritarian regimes, do you think that that is one of the main culprits in the abuse of human rights?
Well, look, the Arab League is a collection, an organization of those very same governments. So, of course, it represents the interests of those governments. Now, there are differences among those governments, of course, but I wish I could say that there is strong leadership for, strong human rights leadership among those governments, but I would be hard-pressed to find a single government member state of the Arab League that is a leader, is really showing the way on human rights. Of course, some states are better than others. Some states there are less serious violations than others. But I see no one either among the member states or, frankly, although there's some very good people in the Secretariat, again, at the end of the day, it's the states that set the tone. It's the states that set the limits, and those limits continue to be rather severe across the board.
Mr. Azam, another interesting point made by that report was that there's less of a crackdown recently of Islamist groups and more of a crackdown on reformists. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm not really in a position to comment on that because I don't have really any specific information. But if I may correct you on one thing, the 1994 Charter was in effect a dead letter. No Arab state ratified it at all. And what happened was that the Arab League in 2003 proposed what they called the modernization of the Arab Charter, and the new charter was put together, adopted in 2004. This charter has only recently, in March 2008, come into force with 7 Arab states ratifying it.
So in those 10 years, that's a clear indication that there's possibly more sincerity in trying to ratify this charter and increase human rights.
Well, this is the effort as far as we can read it. And I think, what the Arab League is trying to do is begin to take human rights obligations more seriously, begin to work with its member states to effect changes that are required, as this conference is trying to do. In the final analysis, we are dealing with the world of sovereign states. And whether there is political will to actually move ahead on the human rights agenda, to effect changes, to release prisoners of conscience and to release human rights defenders, for example, who are imprisoned in many parts of the region, is going back to this political will. Now, we can only encourage and hope that states will continue to move in this direction, and that they would fulfill their obligations under their own commitments to human rights treaties. 16 of the Arab countries are parties already to the international covenants on civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. Whether or not they have ratified the Arab Charter, they are still committed under those covenants. So the matter of amending local legislation, ensuring that practice is compliant with these obligations, is a matter of ongoing work with those governments. What we try to do is provide the needed technical assistance and work with those governments to make sure that rights are respected in accordance with those obligations. Okay,
let's pose this to Hassan Ibrahim. Hassan, from everything you've seen and heard, is there the political will amongst these sovereign states?
In order to grapple with such a thorny topic like human rights in this dangerous region, we need to ask the basic question. Are we ready to adopt the Universal Declaration on Human Rights? Because we keep on hiding behind cultural exclusivity. Why do we oppress? Because when people question us, oh, we have, our culture allows this, and our culture doesn't allow that. There should be a clear, across-the-board, universal denunciation of violence against dissidents. There should be a denunciation of torture, of censorship. We have a clerical institution that is so similar to the Vatican during the Council of Trent, when people were censored and tortured and sometimes imprisoned or declared apostates by, I mean, as recently as September, a Jordanian poet was deemed an apostate just because he wrote a poem, and someone issued a fatwa against this Jordanian poet. We have people issuing fatwas against each other. We have people...
Hassan, let me interrupt you, because you're making some fascinating points, Hassan. I want to pose that to Joe Stork. Joe Stork, interesting points brought up by Hassan Ibrahim, particularly when it comes to those countries that claim their interpretation, particularly in this part of the world, their interpretation of the law or the Sharia cannot accommodate the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What's your take on that, Joe Stork?
Well, Hassan is absolutely right. And if you look at the various instruments, if you will, or declarations of various collections of Muslim states, of Islamic states, you know, the standard line is, you know, we'll guarantee X, Y, and Z insofar as it doesn't contradict the Sharia. But then, of course, this is really a canard. I mean, who is to interpret the Sharia here? The interpretations that are put forth are all put forth by government institutions, and all the interpretations, the understandings of Islamic law are certainly skewed in a way as to enhance the security operations of the state. I mean, I'm sorry, there's no, you know, there are no gaps, serious gaps between Sharia and international human rights standards on most issues. There are a few, like that Hassan has pointed out, like freedom of religion, issues that come into in Islamic terms around the issue of apostasy and so forth. I mean, I think what's encouraging is that these are being talked about frankly today in a way that they weren't in the past, and that people are, Muslims are grappling seriously with these issues and looking for ways to, in fact, reconcile and understand Sharia in ways that are completely compliant with international standards. It can be done, and it's starting to be done.
Fateh Azam, Joe Stork said that, sorry Hassan, let me bring in Fateh Azam. There's not much time left on the program. He said that Muslims are grappling with these issues. My question is, from everything that you know, do you feel that there's apathy amongst people in the region, or that there is a popular movement calling for a greater participation, greater democracy, and of course greater human rights?
No, I don't think there is apathy at all. I think we're seeing a growing civil society movement in the region. We're seeing now a very long and honorable history of human rights organizations working at the grassroots level in demanding rights. And I would also add, in terms of the previous discussion, that already we have in the different states different interpretations of the Sharia, exactly as Joe was referring to. So it's difficult to generalize so broadly, and it's very important to say that each country and each society is grappling with some of these issues, but that progress is being made. We are seeing, for example, in some Gulf countries, women judges being appointed for the first time. We're seeing them beginning to take more part in ministerial positions, for example. Very small steps, very hesitant steps, but steps that basically express that it is possible to move forward, it is possible to create change. And I think the reworking and the rejuvenation of the Arab Charter, and now it's coming into force, is a very important step forward, and we hope to continue this progress.
Hassan Ibrahim, in 30 or 40 seconds, the final word.
Okay, the final word. I can tell you that Sharia does not contradict the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Quran states clearly no coercion in religion, number one. Number two, unfortunately in the Arab world, over the past 2 years, the number of books confiscated by Al-Azhar and other clerical institutions increased by 60%. Basically the oppression of dissidents and the number of human rights violations, I believe, are quadrupled. And just judging by the interrogation into Guantanamo, most of the Guantanamo detainees were sent to Arab countries to be tortured to extract confessions, as per the Pentagon. And that's why I say unless we have structural changes in this region, we will not go forward.
Gentlemen, it's an intriguing and educational discussion. Thank you very much for joining us, Fateh Hazam, Hassan Ibrahim and Joe Stork. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments, your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye-bye for now.